I'm extremely grateful to Susan and to Jose for organising this. And it's a great pleasure to revisit areas which I've sort of wandered around for the last 23 years, as it were. When I talked in '94, I believe what I did was to talk about EOs and sexual pursuit in a paper that didn't appear in the Rape volume but did appear in the Natalie Campen Sexuality in Ancient Art volume. And is that dark enough for people, by the way? People happy to see that level of light? Yeah, good, okay. I like it darker, but there we are. And my interest was in the way in which Attic vase painting enabled the use of what had become a conventional sexual pursuit motif, about which I'm going to say more in a moment, enabled that motif to be effectively reversed so that you could explore what it might be like, as it were in a thought experiment, what might it be like if rather than men pursuing women, women pursued men. And we get a whole body of pots in which Eos, the dawn, pursues either Tithonus, as on the left here, with his lyre, or pursues the hunter, Cephalus, with his hunting spears. And these effectively take iconographies that we're completely used to seeing, and you'll see in a moment, with gods pursuing mortal women, or heroes pursuing mortal women, and turn them round. Now, these iconographies, which I'll illustrate with Poseidon and Amymone, appear more or less from the beginning of Red Figure. You get sexual pursuit scenes with gods and heroes chasing women. They pursue from the left to the right, or from the right to the left. They're usually armed with something. Here Poseidon has his trident. Often there will be a spear. You've seen already the variation that you play on that with Menelaus and the sword and the dropping of the sword. And they are well described as scenes of pursuit. The pursued figure often looks back, and scholars have wondered how exactly one interprets the various gestures. So figures react. They react sometimes by throwing their hands in the air, but sometimes those gestures and those backward-looking glances can, as it were, be recuperated as almost an encouragement to the pursuit. What I want to do this morning is to think very briefly about how this iconography develops over time. These scenes are popular, as I say, from the beginning of Red Figure, but particularly from about 500 through to the third quarter of the 5th century. And then they fade out completely. And only one or two particular scenes, Boreas and Orothea, for some reason, has a bit of a longer life. But most of these scenes, you don't find them being explored again after about 440. And within that sequence, already in the middle of the century, there's something of a change of iconography. So you see, and these are more or less contemporary pots, in fact, but they illustrate the change pretty nicely. On the left, with the Fiale painter, you've got essentially a variation on the iconography that we've just seen, a rather more aggressive gesture, if anything, from Poseidon here, as he brandishes his trident. But on the right, the trident has no longer much more than an identifying attribute. and the relationship between Poseidon and Hermione is shown as distinctly more intimate. Their gazes meet in a rather different sort of a way, or at least the sort of modest downcast gesture of the gaze of Hermione back to Poseidon can certainly be recuperated in ways that suggest submissiveness perhaps, but also suggest that there's some sort of mutual attraction perhaps between these two figures. And that sort of change within the pursuit iconography, as I say, is common across quite a range of these different particular pursuit scenes. And you get it, as it were, coming to its culmination, I suppose, in some sense, when on this Lekithos from the manner of the Midias painter, there's no real pursuit going on at all. We've got Poseidon and Hermione appearing in what appears to be a sort of mutually happy relationship. Can we do for Attic vases what Karen convincingly did for her modern comic scenes? That is, can we read out of these iconographic changes changes in social attitudes? Attitudes towards rape, attitudes towards men and women's sexual relations. In some ways, it's tempting to do so. It's tempting to think that what we've got here is a story where, during the course of the 5th century, we have, if not a mellowing of male attitudes to women and a greater respect for women, we at least have a sense that the symposium has become a place for discussing not simply issues of macho male behaviour and sexual conquest, but actually the way in which men treat women. Whether we should do that or not, however, is, I think, questioned when you look at what is happening to iconography more generally. So one of the things I've been interested in over the past 20 years has been the ways in which the iconography on red figure pots changed from the beginning of red figure to the middle of the century. And whatever sort of activity you look at, so here athletics, you see a change from scenes that emphasize action to scenes that do anything but. They emphasize contemplation in a sense. Instead of being asked to think about athletic activity, you're being asked to think about the athlete. Or again, with warfare, where early red figure cups look at all sorts of aspects of warfare. On the right here, a rather rare scene of actual animal sacrifice of an animal before battle. On the right, this rather splendid warrior advancing with his equally splendid and very large shield. So you've got warriors very much in action. By the middle of the century, what you have is warriors standing around accepting libations as they depart for war, or receiving their helmet, usually from a female figure, a wife or mother, as it were. Now, those sorts of general iconographic changes occur across the whole range of imagery, and that includes explicitly sexual imagery. So the famous pornographic cups are very much a feature of the first half of the 5th century. The second half of the century sees very little imagery of that sort. So we've got a widespread change in iconography that's happening, which is reflected in that change in the iconography of sexual pursuit. What should we make of this change? Well, part of what's happening in this change is simply is a change in the whole style in which artists are depicting human figures. That this change from, as it were, the silhouette that explores action to often figures in rather more complex poses where you're invited into what that figure is thinking. That's in effect the change from archaic to classical art. It's the Greek Revolution that's usually explored in relation to the style of sculpture. But it carries with it, clearly, a way of seeing the world. And it's that that raises the possibility that we should indeed import back into the changing iconography on sexual pursuit scenes at least some sense that actually this goes with a different way of configuring the appropriate way to talk about sexual relations with women, particularly in the context of the symposium. And in the second half of what I want to do, I want to try and make the case for that by looking at two scenes that are developed in the late 5th century, as it were, to fill the gap. So I'm going to return to Helen briefly in a moment, and then I'm going to look at the Leucipids. So I'm going to look at the way in which, with sexual pursuit having, as it were, lost its pursuit element, Athenian artists in a couple of particular contexts bring in instead scenes which are scenes more obviously of abduction or rape. So let me very quickly run through, first of all, some of the plots that you've already seen from Karen, hoping deliberately to complement what Karen's doing. Here we have, but I start with not Paris or Menelaus, but Helen and Theseus, briefly mentioned by Karen. So this plot attributed to Euthymides already shows not a straightforward sexual pursuit scene, but a scene in which we've got Theseus apparently carrying off Helen. And that is seen even more clearly here, where you also have, as it were, the chariot waiting. The chariot, I think, is a rather interesting motif, both pointing towards marriage processions on the one hand, but also pointing towards abduction and whizzing the woman away, the stealing away. So Theseus is used repeatedly to explore the relations, the attractions of Helen, but the attractions of Helen in a context which is a context of pursuit that doesn't end in marriage. Sometimes we do indeed get pretty well classic sexual pursuit motifs, as here, though we're not certainly dealing with Theseus and Helen in these cases, though it's often been thought that we should be seeing them in those terms, partly things like the two spears of the hunter that pick out Theseus here. We've already seen that when we move to Helen being wooed by Menelaus, we get not a pursuit scene, but the hand on the wrist that signals marriage. And in cases which may show Paris, we've got a backstory, even in black figure, that emphasizes the marriage overtones. And we've already seen this cut by Macron, where sexual desire is very much symbolized by the presence of an eros. But in the late 5th century, you get on this tremendous little pot in a style close to the Eretria painter, you get the chariot being used very much not as a sort of processional chariot in a wedding, but in a context where the bride or the woman is being snatched away. And that, perhaps even more graphically, shown by the Helen painter in the early 4th century, where we do indeed, and Karen referred to pots that do this, we do indeed have a Helen who is naked and a rather splendidly attired Paris, whose exotic Eastern origins are signalled from the hat down, as it were, throughout this costume. So Helen is one example where, while early red figure has lots of interest in Theseus, who can just do pursuit, as it were, late 5th century artists have no interest in Theseus and Helen, and they turn their attention instead to Paris, but in Paris in contexts where, yes, desire is certainly present, but we've very much got an image that is an image of abduction, and perhaps pretty close to being an image of rape. The other iconography where you get a similar change concerns the rape of the Leucipphids. Now again, here, when this scene first appears in the middle of the 5th century, this is on a pot by or close to the painter Polygnotus, is more or less conventional sexual pursuit. Further example here is the painter of Munich 2335, for those who like their painter numbers, and a nice example of clothed women and naked pursuing men. But this is straightforward sexual pursuit motifs. However, already by the middle of the 5th century, on this rather unusual bobbing by the Sotheby painter, we've got this use of the speeding chariot motif that we've already seen to suggest that what was happening to the Leucipphids wasn't simply a matter of sexual pursuit. And famously on the Hydria by the Midias painter, the great Hydria in the British Museum, where you've got the scene drawn out here, you have this sort of sci-fi descent of the male aggressors snatching off the daughters of Leucippus right from the middle of the scene, or a detail here, very difficult to get a good picture of what's happening here. In a way that undoubtedly, I think, stresses violence, unexpected, unwanted attack. So what I'm interested in here is the development of these scenes. So as sexual pursuit ceases to offer a way of reading it that looks to violence and becomes recuperated as scenes where what you explore instead is the possibility of mutual attraction and what might be going on in the head of the man pursuing or the woman pursued. So Athenian artists, at least in these two particular iconographies, develop an iconography that enables them to put the violence back in, to restore questions about abduction and, I would say, rape, to restore those to the agenda. I'm going to finish with that. Thank you.